production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
The intricacies of federal housing programs and questions about how some money was used tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, President and Executive Editor of the Daily Memphian. Thanks for joining us. I am joined tonight by Paul Young, Director of Housing and Community Development for the City of Memphis. Thanks for being here again.
Thanks for having me.
Along with Bill Dries, reporter with the Daily Memphian. So we'll talk about a bunch of things that HCD is involved in, that you are involved in, everything from the fairgrounds to downtown TDZ, Pinch District, a whole lot of small housing and affordable housing projects that are going on. So we'll walk through as much as we can, but we'll start with a story, an issue that came out in the fall and a story that Bill did recently about federal HUD wanting back as much as $17 million in funds.
Right.
And we'll walk through all that and the kind of intricacies of how this works and all the different programs that are going on. Let me say, and I'll turn a lot of that over to Bill, but to start, what they're saying is the money was used on projects that weren't approved. But let me say that it is not a thing where HUD is saying someone lined their pockets with this money, a developer or an official or something like that. We'll get that out of the way. But they are expressing concern about how certain money was used. So maybe walk us through that, and I'll let Bill help us out.
So there were technical errors in how the funds were applied. And just to take a step back, we're talking about HOME funds, HOME. These funds are allocated to cities across the country based on formulas, and the funds are intended to be used for developing affordable housing. We've used them with small nonprofits. We've used them with larger multifamily developments. And the two projects that are in question that are under review were Claiborne Point, which was formerly Claiborne Homes, and the former Marina Cove, which is now Eden Square over off Winchester and Mendenhall. And so on these projects, with HOME funds, you're supposed to meet what they call a commitment requirement. You have 2 years to commit your funds to a project, and there's a very technical definition for what it means to commit funds to a project. And so under that definition, you must have an executed contract with the owner of the property. You must have an environmental that's completed. You have to do a cost analysis, all these different things that you have to check the box on. And the issue in these instances were that all of the boxes weren't checked by the time the funds were committed. And so based on HUD's definition, they said you don't have a true commitment on these projects at the time that you issued the funds, so we want you to pay back all of those funds, because they don't see themselves as having much wiggle room, because the commitment definition is outlined by Congress. It's statutory.
And all this is was spending that was done between 2012 and 2015. Is that correct?
It was a little bit earlier. It started in 2011, and the spending went through about 2015, 2016.
Okay, Bill.
And to be clear on this, the rules for committing the funding, how it is supposed to be committing, that has changed over the years, hasn't it?
Yeah, so now they have suspended the requirement for commitment because many cities across the country have had this issue. And there's been a lot of coverage that's taken place on how cities have had issues with the commitment requirement. Many cities have been required to repay funds. The issue in our instance is that it's a sizable amount. And so just to dig a little bit deeper on the issue on Claiborne, was that the city had an agreement with the housing authority for the development of the projects. This is similar to all of the agreements we've had with all of the different Hope 6 projects. We have a master agreement with the housing authority as the developer, and we would have, whether it's capital funds, city dollars, federal funds, all of the dollars that we're using for the project from the city perspective that we're applying to MHA would be through this master development agreement. And the issue with HOME funds was that MHA doesn't technically own the property because it's a tax credit property. When you have a tax credit property, it's actually owned by an LLC. that's getting the tax benefit. And so our agreement should have been with the LLC. So we're going back and now trying to revise agreements and make sure that the agreement is with the actual entity. And so that will allow us to be able to preserve some of the funding. The issue on the issue on Marina Cove was that if anybody remembers what Marina Cove looked like and all of the issues that were outlined on the property, you remember that it was in pretty poor shape. The city used home funds to demolish the whole property. We built housing. It was about 24 acres. We built housing on about 1.5 acres in partnership with Power Center, CDC, and Habitat for Humanity. But HUD's issue there was that we possibly over-subsidized the property because we only built 9 houses.
So in essence, use that home money to subsidize the creation of the Power Center school and so on.
Right. So that's part of their concern.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in the case of Eden Square, Marina Cove, which was an apartment complex that actually had water canals in it, which became a breeding ground for mosquitoes when the property was abandoned. In the case of what is now Eden Square, is it possible that there could be more housing built as part of that development?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was always the plan, was that more housing was going to come. We had to meet, not only is there an a commitment deadline, there's also an expenditure deadline. You have 2 years to commit home funds and you have 5 years to spend it. We were pushing up on the 5-year commitment. We needed to get homes delivered on the site. So we built what we believed were the requisite number of housing units at 9 based on the amount of home funds that we used. But there were still some issues that they identified in the end.
In one instance, they came to look around. The HUD folks came to look around, and when they saw the school, they were not. Some alarm bells went off.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the site, the biggest thing on the site is obviously the school, and so they assumed that the city put home funds into the school, which technically we didn't. We put the funds into the demolition and clearing of the site, and our position is that it's a mixed-use development. It's a 24-acre site with multiple uses on the site, and mixed use in the city of Memphis is not necessarily the way mixed use looks in a city like New York or DC, where commercials on the bottom floor and residential's on the upper floor. When you have the suburban style environment like Hickory Hill, mixed use is more horizontal. So you have multiple uses, schools, commercial, and housing all on one site.
Mm-hmm. So walk me through how this goes, because you're negotiating, it seems like, over essentially the amount. When do you think you'll know something on that is final?
Yeah, so we're doing a couple of things. We have a national expert that's working with us on digging into the numbers and trying to revise the agreements to make as much of the projects eligible as possible, which will reduce the number. One of the things that I have really been trying to work on, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but there was about $10 million total that was spent on both of these projects that was ever committed, $10 million. Of that $10 million, we spent 6.8. And so what's happening is HUD is saying you violated the commitment issue with $10 million, and we don't deem these projects eligible, so the 6.8 goes on top of the $10 million, which is what pushes us to 17. My argument is the 6.8 is a part of the $10 million. So once HUD reclaims the $10 million, they have the full amount that was ever allocated to the city of Memphis. It was not 2 separate amounts. So that's one of the conversations that the mayor is going to be having with the secretary. Aside from that, we're still trying to make as much of these projects eligible as possible, and that will reduce the amount as well.
So that money, if HUD, when will you find out from HUD, or are you just in the bureaucracy here?
I would say we're still negotiating, so I don't have a firm deadline. I would think in the next 6 months or so we will know a little bit more.
That money, if it has to be repaid at whatever level, that comes out of the general fund?
No, so that's a good clarification. Thanks for asking that. So the money, if it has to be repaid, will come out of future allocations. So each year we receive about $3.5 million in home funds, and so that would be reduced to somewhere around $1 million.
As they kind of take back as a penalty almost for that.
Exactly. And that part is negotiable. Those are the things that we'll be talking to HUD about, is how much can we pay back each year? How long can we spread this out?
In the meantime, are they, the money that you talked about, the $3 million a year, is that on hold, or are they actually allocating that money?
We have the amount for this year that we were supposed to receive. They have not docked our pay yet.
Right.
But what happens is they will de-obligate. That's the term that they use, de-obligate. We have a federal account where all of the funds sit, and they will go into the account and pull back any dollars that are not committed to a project.
You came in 2016 with the Strickland administration.
Mm-hmm.
All this was done, all this occurred under the Wharton administration.
Yeah, all of the commitments happened between 2011 and 2013.
When you came in, did you recognize, or you or your staff recognize, hey, there were problems from potential problems from 2011? You didn't?
No, this became aware to us. We became aware of this last year. So
when federal HUD sent the letter to Strickland,
we knew that there were issues before September, but it was somewhere around March when they started asking for further documentation on those projects, which is what gave us an indication that they're looking at them. But we didn't know what the specific issues were until we got the letter in September.
Back during this time, Robert Lipscomb was in your position.
Right.
He was also over MHA, which was, Robert Lipscomb was we won't relive all that, but most people who follow this show or follow Memphis politics know that he was a controversial figure. I mean, he was very much associated with bringing a lot of money into the city, federal dollars, and leveraging them into some of these big conversions of huge, pretty blighted housing projects, which we've talked about a lot over the years. But there was also these questions of him wearing both hats. And there were definitely people who were uncomfortable with where the money was going. Does this go back to that? I mean, and I guess what I'm bouncing around, do you look back and point your finger at the previous administration, and specifically Lipscomb and his staff, for what they did wrong?
So certainly not pointing fingers. I think that these were technical errors in the administration of the project, and staff was working on very, very complex projects. And when HUD talks about this with us, they said that your staff just does not have the sophistication for these types of deals. So obviously they also acknowledge the fact that having a public housing director and the city housing director can create some conflicts.
Which you do not wear both those hats.
I do not wear both of those hats, no. But I don't think that was the root of the problem. The root of the problem was the technical issues.
And to clarify, and we may maybe wrap this up and move on to some of the other projects you're involved in. If people, as I said at the top of the show, HUD is not saying that someone lined their pockets, that someone embezzled money, that someone committed a criminal offense.
That's correct.
Okay.
There's nobody that lined their pockets with this project. These were technical errors. The housing is attractive, affordable units have been provided. People are living there. If you go and take pictures of the units or go talk to the people that live in the units, you will see that the funding was spent within the spirit of the home program, which is the case that we've been making to HUD.
Yeah, Bill.
You talked some about other cities and the mixed-use concept. Just about everything that garners any attention here, whether it's done publicly or privately or some combination of it today in Memphis, involves mixed-use development. So are the federal regulations, I guess now they've caught up with the concept of mixed use.
Right.
But was there some lag time where it took a while for HUD to kind of figure out, oh, okay, there are other uses on the property, but there's also housing there too?
No, I think they fully understand it, and their funds can be used for mixed-use projects. It's just you have to have all of these different cost allocations to ensure that their funding only went into the housing units and not the other aspects of the project, and that's part of what their concerns were on Marina Cove in particular.
We'll kind of begin to segue out of that, but South City is one of the last conversions of these. There were originally 11, I believe, big housing projects that were built that have been torn down. This is the last one. This is basically southeast of FedEx Forum, kind of to the. And if people haven't driven, it is a massive project. I drove by recently in the last week or two. What is the status of that? And talk about that mix of funding that for specifically South City. That is not just federal dollars, it's a mix of federal, local, and private funds, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So South City's redevelopment of foot homes, Fort Holmes had about 420 units. They're rebuilding 600 to 700 units on the site, and there are a number of neighborhood improvements right now. We are wrapping up phase 1, which is roughly 120 units. Phase 2 is under construction, another 120 units, and we should be closing on phase 3 sometime this late spring, early summer. So you'll start to see those units begin to be occupied by the fall. We're moving forward on the housing side. There are a number of partners in terms of funding. HUD provided $30 million. The city matched it at $30 million. The Women's Foundation has raised private capital to enhance the lives of the people that moved away in partnership with the Housing Authority, Urban Strategies, and McCormick, Barron, Salazar, and ComCap Advisors. So there's a lot of players that are coming together to try to revitalize that space, and it's moving forward very well.
Thinking about that area around there, which was so blighted, at one point in the history of Memphis was a very active area.
Right.
But Vance Middle School is there now empty. There was talk when this whole project was going to happen that this redevelopment was going to happen. Some money would go into or efforts to revitalize not just the land itself, but the area around it. So what's the status of Vance Middle School, and what else might be happening around there to improve the quality of life?
Yeah, so there are 3 vacant schools in the area, Vance, Georgia, and MLK. MLK is the old Porter Junior High. The school board just voted to demolish Vance. I think that was last month. And so that is happening, and there will be a vacant development opportunity. I think Inner City Rugby is using the space right now, which is a great use for the property. The city, in partnership with MHA, had options on MLK in Georgia. We are going to go back to the school board and release our option on Georgia and try to move forward with MLK and try to get some offices and mixed use type development in that space to activate the neighborhood.
Okay. Bill, 9 minutes left.
All right. Where is the response of private development in the area? And we should point out the South City, the development area is more than just what used to be Foote and Claiborne. It's a much bigger area than that. So how is private development responding now that you've got homes coming up on Foote Homes, and Claiborne is what it is, a completely different looking area than when it was public housing?
Yeah, I think the development community is responding well. I don't think projects like Union Row would be in progress but for the work that we're doing at South City, because you are revitalizing a significant swath of that community that's immediately adjacent to Union Row. You see things like Forum Flats that's coming up. Universal Life is in very close proximity.
Forum Flats, people maybe see, even with the tournament this last weekend, are the apartments that are right at that corner across from Universal Life and the church.
Right.
Yeah.
So the housing units that are right there, Danny Thomas and MLK. So the development community is responding. We actually have a private development opportunity that the city has put out, along with 7 other proposals on memphistn.gov/PDO. You can go and check those out, but there's a development opportunity there just south of Claiborne Temple. So there are some significant opportunities, and part of the beauty of what's happening in that neighborhood and community is that we want to be able to preserve affordability while seeing the neighborhood grow and prosper.
Now the 8 parcels are spread around the city, and these are areas of land that the city either owns directly or has some indirect ownership of, and the idea is for those areas to be catalyst, to get something going there, and then it spreads to the surrounding area.
Right, so that's the concept behind Memphis 3.0. Our first comprehensive plan for the city is to identify anchors in communities and have those anchors be the catalyst for development. So no longer will we try to sprinkle funds all over the city and have minimal impact, but let's identify where's the heartbeat of each neighborhood, of each community, and use those as investment opportunities. And so these properties are in anchor areas, and they go from Raleigh to Fairgrounds to South City to Pinch District, Binghamton, Crosstown, Orange Mound. So there's a significant swath of the city that's going to see private interest, and so we're excited about that.
You mentioned a couple of things that we were going to get to. Fairgrounds, where that redevelopment is essentially under your purview, right?
Yep.
Where does that stand? What happens next?
So Fairgrounds, we received approval in November for the TDZ from the state. So now is the hard work where we put together all the financials. We have to make the numbers real. We have a RFQ out for a developer to develop the northern portion of the site. That's the area along Central where the track is right now, Central Early Maxwell area. Our goal is to fill up that 18 acres with commercial development. That commercial development will provide the sales tax revenue to support the rest of the site.
That could be restaurants, stores, hotel, motel.
All of the above. We know that we want to see a hotel there. We're sure that retail, restaurant retail would work very well there, given that we're looking to develop this youth sports facility.
And then downtown TDZ, you're involved in that one as well.
Yeah.
Where does that stand, and what is your? I mean, that starts getting into everything from the Pinch to the riverfront to
Right.
The convention center. I don't know what order you want to take those. But
Yeah,
where do all
so
those stand?
downtown TDZ, there are a lot of things happening and a lot of players that are making it happen. Memphis River Parks Partnership obviously is doing the work along the riverfront. The convention center is coming up right now. We're working in the Pinch District to rebuild infrastructure in the area that can facilitate development. So there are a lot of great things happening in downtown. We have until 2031, and so we're trying to see as much activity as we can to boost up those sales tax revenues to allow us to do more relative to tourism.
Before I go to Bill, 2031 is important because
That's the end of the TDZ
so at that
in
point,
downtown.
all that sales tax revenue, instead of much of it staying in Memphis for these kinds of projects, it starts going directly to the state, like most sales tax revenue.
Exactly.
Okay, and I should say Wayne Risher on our staff had a long, detailed story about the history of those kinds of developments, those kinds of the TDZ and so on. But Bill, 5 minutes left.
There was also recently some movement on the Convention Center Hotel. There's a little bit of breathing room in that, as I understand. There was an original deadline for the hotel to be open, and that's now got, as I said, a little more breathing room in it.
Yeah, there's a little more breathing room there. I think the deadline initially was 2021 or 2022, and now they pushed it back a year or two. So it gives them a little bit more time to get all the things in place to get that development done. So we're really excited about having a hotel to complement what will be a new and improved convention center.
It's a 450 room hotel.
it's
It's a 500.
I thought it was 6, but
Okay, yeah, but a massive hotel. Yeah, okay.
it'll be a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, Bill.
And so what happens to the area around it, which is of some interest because your office is at 170 North Main. City Hall's directly across the street from this. Any long-term thoughts about what happens to Civic Center Plaza when a convention center hotel and complex comes to the neighborhood?
Yeah, well, I hadn't been involved in any discussions about any of the uses changing at Civic Plaza. Obviously, it would change the character of the plaza. It would make it more active, which I think that's the thing that we would all like to see is more activity out there. The space that it is looking to occupy is not that highly used, and so I think it will just be a complementary use to all of the other things that are on the plaza.
You talked about some of the big projects and obviously the South City and some of the huge housing projects. There are smaller ones too, neighborhood level, and we've had you on before talking about that. Talk about your role or HCD's role with much smaller, even home improvements for people who are low income and so on.
Yeah, so we have a host of programs. We just finished our grant round where we're supporting nonprofits across the city, whether it's a block club that wants to do an after-school program to community service agencies that are battling homelessness. And so we do that type work. We have nonprofit partners, many of them were on last week, that are out in the neighborhoods fighting blight or rebuilding housing units one at a time. People like Steve Lockwood in Fraser or Rashawn Austin at the Works in South Memphis. So there's a host of agencies that we partner with to try to rebuild neighborhood and community. We understand that housing is one aspect, and that's obviously the biggest space that we play in. But in order to make a complete community, you have to ensure that the families that are going to occupy those housing units have opportunities. And so we try to support those to the extent we can through our grant programs.
And to what percentage of the money you're talking about with grants and that is passing through is federal money?
So we have a budget of about 16 million, and about 11 of it is federal.
The rest is
It's
city.
Yeah, about 5 million in city funds, and the remainder is federal.
Okay. And you talked about blight and the show we did last week with Steve Barlow, Neighborhood Preservation Inc., and some other folks. Has the city done enough on that? I mean, is there, and what more do you think could be done through your office or through the city administration with blight and blighted properties?
I think the city has worked within the confines that we have been given. I think one of the things that we are looking at now is trying to figure out, are there ways for us to find more flexible funding? I think this issue that we started the show with home funds has demonstrated to us that we can dictate the needs of our community better than the federal government can. We just have to have more flexible tools that will allow us to be able to administer the funds in a way where we are able to help people. And so we're exploring, are there other tools that we can put in place that can support that?
And does that also come accountability? Back to how we started the show. I mean,
Absolutely. It definitely comes down to accountability. We want to make sure that the funds are going towards the intended use. If the use is affordable housing, we want to make sure that it's in the hands of people that are delivering the housing units.
All right. Thank you very much. That's all the
Thank
time
you.
we have. Thank you, Bill. And thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.